Thank you very much for inviting me, because this is also the occasion of meeting many friends I've known in the past, and to visit Prato for the first time, I must admit. Although I'm from Siena, Prato was a great discovery, and Monash University too. So my presentation started from your request and from the help of my students of the course of Theory of Translation, who were involved in a survey, which I'm going to describe. Italy is a multifaceted country, and variety is the key word to understand it from various points of view: language, traditions, food culture, architecture, art, environment, heritage, and so on. Whatever is the focus of a research, it has to take into consideration the extreme differentiation that is constantly in struggle with trends towards homogenization. The parameters that will be taken into account in this research are language and space, in order to give an insight into contemporary Italy and its social asset through multilingual texts that are under everybody's eyes in urban or rural spaces, in public or private facilities. The importance of an effective communication in open spaces where a large number of subjects who do not share the same language and culture are circulating is commonly shared. Such spaces are no longer limited to bilingual regions or to those areas devoted to international exchanges or with a high concentration of tourists, like airports, congress halls, hotels, museums, and so on. An explosion of multilingualism has emerged in many other contexts as an expression of ethnicity, especially in urban centers where new migrants tend to settle and live. The study of multilingual signage may prove particularly interesting to investigate multiculturality and inclusion in contemporary Italy. Not only the languages used and the sign location can be interpreted as witnesses of social phenomena in a changing Italy, but also the translation quality can be an important key to understand their social impact and the emotional reaction of addressees in the case of a poor translation. In this presentation, a series of recent examples will be analyzed under the umbrella of the research fields of linguistic landscapes and semiotic landscapes. I'm not going to describe in details all the studies that have been developed during the last 30 years, since the 90s, under these two categories. Just let me say that there are three areas of research that have been touched. The first is the role of English in signage, in public signage. And here you have two examples of translations of signage in China or in Dubai, but there are plenty, and in many other countries too. The second area, which has recently emerged also in Italy, refers to the mirror in those areas where many migrants have settled on shop signs and multilingual names. And here you have an example in Graz, for example, in Austria, where German and Turkish are present on the window of a shop. And this relates to visibility of immigrant languages. And the third research field refers to ethnolinguistic vitality and translation issues. And this is probably the less developed. But if you think of the border areas where two languages are are present, you may be interested in seeing which ones are represented or not, or how the languages are present in a country like China, where only a few years ago only Chinese was on the signs. So let's start considering the variety of languages in Italy. Certainly, Standard Italian is present, especially in the written text, but also, and mostly, regional varieties of Standard Italian, plus Italian dialects, minority languages, and immigrant languages and tourist languages. Tourist languages may include international students. I'm not going to distinguish. Some numbers. 60 million Italian citizens, and 2,500,000 of them speak also a minority language. The minority languages refer of communities of ancient settlement, like Greco or in southern Italy, or Arberesh, and so on. But we also have 50 million of tourists moving yearly in Italy, and this is one of the recent numbers we have found, 5 million resident immigrants. Of course, this is only what emerges from the service, but immigrants in Italy are many more, maybe the double number if we consider also temporary migrants and asylum seekers. Interesting is also to see which are the first countries among tourists: Germany, USA, France, China, UK, and the first 5 immigrant communities at the moment, which are Romania, Albania, Morocco, China, and Ukraine. Our research, which I called Sign One database because it's an ongoing research, is based on 226 multilingual signs that have been collected by my students between March and June 2017. It's just for this conference, but it's the beginning of a wider research, and maybe some of you may be interested in being involved in. And they have been taken through mobile phones, also answering to a template where I had included some questions, some research questions, which I'm now describing. And the results are of a series of maps, and one of them will be shown in this presentation. The signs that have been included are all visible to people with free or limited access to the location, intentionally positioned by a sender, the owner of a shop or a local authority, and containing a message which is printed and not handwritten on paper, metal, wood. That means that it's intended to stay, to remain there, unless someone takes it away, and with verbal and non-verbal message on it, with at least 2 languages. And this is the main part of the project, which is peculiar because many other researchers in this field, like the seminal work by Backhaus in Tokyo in the 90s, and he considered multilingual messages, all the signs in a different which was not Japanese. Even a monolingual sign in another language was considered part of his research. In this case, I wanted to focus on the confrontation between languages and also on translation issues. So the research questions are the following. Which are the contexts where these signs were found? Which is the distribution on the territory? Which are the communicative functions? Is there a text only verbal or also iconic? And which are the languages present? And are there translation issues on them? The first question about the context. My students were allowed to take pictures wherever they were moving, and it's a random collection at the moment. Other researchers have based their collection on one street, like we research in Canada, for example, in Quebec, or in one area of a town, like the research of my colleagues Barni and Vedovelli in Esquilino in Rome. This research had Italy as a target, and for this reason I left them free to find any multilingual sign. And the first 2 contexts are commercial facilities and stations, followed by streets or parks, museums, a means of transport, places of worship, and with very little occurrences, also offices, schools, hospitals, and etc. It's important because when we are considering the languages present in these signs, we'll see that immigrant languages are a large minority, but this is also due to the context where they took their pictures. Interestingly, the distribution is very wide, and almost all the regions are interested. Here we see exactly which provinces offered the examples I'm describing you. So we're trying in the second part of the research, which will continue next year, to cover most of Italy, especially Sardinia, for example, which is completely, or Marche and so on. The functions. In the template, I gave the students the opportunity to choose one of these three main functions, but leaving them the opportunity also to add some. The most represented function is the informative one, of course, because they are mostly shops or stations, but also prohibitions and orders are present. And it's interesting. We'll see how they are given. The conative function is one of the most interesting to analyze. And here we'll do this first analysis of some messages that want the addressee to do something. In this case, we are in Trieste. It's a very nice cafe. And here in the bathroom, I personally took the picture you're watching now. As you can see, the English translation is the only one and has the same kind of politeness that we can find in the Italian one. So we can consider this a very good translation because addressees are equally considered by the producer, the author of this sign. On the contrary, in Montepulciano, in front of the theater, you can see that in Italian, orders are given, or prohibitions, are given in a much ruder way, like vietato fumare, non consumare cibi e bevande in sala, vietato fare fotografie, spegnere il cellulare. This infinitive is rather rude. In English, this sounds much different. Please don't eat and drink inside the theater. Please don't use cameras. You know, this use of please changes completely the register. And here you have one of the most funny signs I have ever seen. We're in a street, in front of a gate. The English version is, for tourists, not park here, please. And for Italians, I can't read it, but you can understand how rude and really very transgressive expressions are used. Verbal and non-verbal. The question was, if we have a multilingual message, we can imagine that we are addressing to people who are not speaking Italian or not only. And I thought that the non-verbal part was much more present. On the contrary, slightly more signs we have collected had only a verbal text. That means that using different languages seems to give the impression to the sender that comprehension is assured. In the other half, on the contrary, we have multilingual message and images. Like in this case, for example, Castiglione del Lago a Perugia, you have aria vietata ai cani, dogs are not allowed, Hunde verboten, so 3 languages, plus the corresponding sign. Or here, in Salerno, it's McDonald's playing ground. You have 3 languages, all the rules in 3 languages, plus for each rule, a picture in childish images, because probably you're thinking, they thought that also children had to understand. Images and even symbols like a cross or an arrow are used, like in this hotel in the mountains, where it's clear that no ski and boots inside, please. And as you can see, English is first. We shall discuss about this later. Which languages? So, Italian and English are the most representative, as it was to be expected. But it's interesting that not always Italian is present. And this is some surprise, because we're in Italy, and we thought that Italian should always be present. So, in this example, the third language is German, followed by French, Spanish, and then other languages, including some immigrant languages like Chinese or Romanian, Albanian, and so on, but in very low numbers. Example 6 is taken in a luxury hotel near Siena, in the thermal baths, and here you have Italian, English, and German, because German guests are the majority in this place, and this is clear. Also, English is the only language used in this cafe, which you may know in front of the Cathedral of Florence. We can recognize it. And here you have the impression that English is used not only to make the message understandable, but also to give an impression of internationality, of style of this place. Sometimes Italian is not present, like here. It's an ice cream shop in Rome. You have various languages, and Italian is only represented by the flag. So, of course, we're in Italy. Everybody knows that this is a gelato. But interestingly, gelato is not there. And you have Korean, you have Chinese, you have Russian, and so on. And here, it's clear no Italian is present because in front of the Cathedral of Florence, you have an information point, and the information is on how to call abroad and how to dial. So it's clear that in certain cases, no Italian is needed, while normally Italian is the first of 3 other languages. Italian, English, German, and French are mostly present in all historical places or museums and so on. This is, for example, in Montepulciano. Sometimes the choice is reduced to 3 or 2 languages. If there are 2, English is present. If there are 3, in this case, the third language is Spanish instead of German, which is the rule. We are in Florence here. Very rare, the cases of multiple translations. We are here in Matera. You know that Matera will be, in 1919, European capital of culture. Siena was in struggle with Matera, and we lost. But in this case, the Casa Grotta has many languages, and this is probably because of funds they have received, or because probably they expect many tourists also from Japan or Russia or China and so on. But Japanese and Russian and Chinese as tourist languages are very rare at the moment. In certain cases, Italian is present, but in a secondary position. Here, Agrigento, welcome, bienvenue, willkommen, bienvenido, and finally, benvenuti ad Agrigento. Why? Probably Italians are less important. In other cases, there is a hybrid text, Italian and English, to talk to tourists, like in La Spezia. Here you have a public sign publishing a website that can be used. In the special in the region in Italy where minority languages are protected, you always have the protected languages present in the signs. For example, in an area of Alto Adige, Valbadia, you have German, Italian, and Latin in this order. And this is a public sign, so it's certainly produced by the local authorities. Let's start with those places where also immigrants move and need to understand messages. Here we are at the railway station in Florence in the waiting room, and as you can see, you have information in Italian, in English, in French, and in Romanian. As you know, I told you, Romanian is the first immigrant community in Italy. So it's not astonishing that the only immigrant language here is Romanian. Also in Tuscany, they are particularly present, and there are all sociological reasons that can let us understand this choice. In Fucecchio north of Florence, with a large number of immigrants, especially of Chinese and Northern African, this sign along the street is in Italian, in capital letters, but also in Albanian, Arab, and Chinese. And Albanian, Arab, and Chinese are all the translations present in this sign. So this is one of the clear witnesses of the presence of a large immigrant community in the area. Rome, bus station, many buses from Rome go to countries from where immigrants come, like Albania, Romania, and so on. And this line, it's a line that has specific target areas. And the information here, or at least it's an order, in fact, to control, to check the tickets at purchase time, is in Italian, in English, but also in Polish, in Spanish, in French, in Albanian, and in Romanian. Romanian, it's a longer text. And we can probably understand, I understood the last sentence, which was not present in the other messages. And it's interesting because not only in Romanian they say that you have to check the tickets, but no reclamation will be accepted in case your ticket is not valid and so on. And multumim, it means thank you. So it's an extra, it's an addition in this case. But it's interesting. Probably only Romanian go and claim for, you may try to interpret this choice. It was not necessary otherwise. And the languages here, there is French, there is English, but not only tourists are probably interested in understanding this sign, but also French-speaking Africans, English-speaking Africans, and Southern Americans who are also immigrants in Italy. The same kind of information, multiple information, you can find many hospitals that do not simply give information or orders or prohibition in Italian or English. But like here in Rome, you have Arab, you have, again, Albanian, and you have no Chinese in this case, but, I mean, at least two of the most represented languages are present. Then you have English and you have French. This is very nice because even colors distinguish the different languages here. And you have in Florence the same question, quanto male senti, is in Romanian first, in Spanish, in English, in Chinese, in Albanian, in Russian, in French, and in Arab. So this also gives an insight in the public that they are addressing to. And in Campi Bisenzio, the famous shopping mall, Gigli, the entrance carpet has Gigli, and then benvenuti, welcome, and in Chinese. You know that we have many Chinese students now in Italy University, and I've noticed that they're how do they spend their free time? Mostly shopping. So probably Campi Bisenzio has a large Chinese community, but also students attending university in Tuscany are often going to this shopping to buy and bring back something home. Trains are also interesting because, as you have seen, we're trying to give an image of contemporary Italy. It's difficult now to know which were the signs in the past, although signing is something that dates back very, very long time ago. Think of Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone is a sign. In many languages, you have plenty of signs in Rome, in Latin, and so on. But the case of trains is interesting because especially in the trains of the lateral areas, you can still find signs dating back to the post-war period, like this one. È pericoloso sporgersi. No trains now have windows that can be opened, so it's impossible to lean out. But still, I have taken this picture, and also interestingly, Italian is first, then you have French, then you have German, and finally you have English. English was not the most important language during the last at least 50 years, it became very important for not my generation, for the following generation, because my parents only learned French at school. I had the choice between French and English. My daughter only learned English, the only possibility. So you have a change. But these are signs of the past that can give you an idea of who were the addressees of our trains in the past. Now it's completely different. Stations, airports have changed, have had a restyling, and the restyling only includes English. English is a lingua franca and very much easier, much shorter, and take a site in wherever you go. And also the new trains like Italo or Frecciarossa only have these languages, rarely have other languages. This is not the case in the regions like Alto Adige. There you will always find German. And Alto Adige is also interesting for another reason. Science can also explain which are the language policy in the background. Here, Poste Italiane in Alto Adige, of course, has messages in Italian and German, but Italian is always first. If a German language school there has a sign, German is first. So you see that there is a struggle of power also in these choices. In fact, normally Italian is the first language either on top or on the left. Why this? Because we write from the left to the right. So our first consideration is on the left of a picture of a sheet. This is not the case for Arabs or Chinese, for example. But in our case, this is an indication of what part is the most important one. Or we have the most relevant language written in different fonts or in capital letters, like here. Italian is, for Trenitalia, is the most important language, and you have messages in Italian and English, but Italian is first and written in bigger size. The sixth research question was related to translation quality. And in the template, my students had to answer these questions. Are there no mistakes? And most of them answered, yes, there are no mistakes. I'm not sure about this, because in my opinion, there are often mistakes in the signature I see around. But for them, it was not so important. In any case, most of them recognized cases of addition, like the case we have seen of the Romanian message, or of cancellation, and specific mistakes in lexical mistakes or morphosyntactic mistakes or pragmatic mistakes, which are a minority but are very interesting to be analyzed. An example of translation issues is the one about realia. We had an interesting presentation this morning of Mauryan poetry, which was related to that. So, in many cases, we see that translations do not consider important or necessary to translate certain words, like in the example here, they translate aceti balsamici, balsamic vinegars, but they do not translate Vinsanto, Chianti, Limoncello di Sorrento, Grappe del Chianti. They're too specific to be translated. On the other side, on the left, you see a sign where panini focacci, on the contrary, is translated into sandwiches and bocadillos. And this is very strange, because this doesn't give the same idea. They are something completely different. So when a realia, something real is translated, there are shifts that can be observed. Addition, an example of addition. Porta all'armata, very, very funny expression. And door alarmed. But the translator understands that maybe this may be not very clear and adds, do not open, which is much better. Cancellation. In front of a church, I have taken this picture, and if you can read, you will see that the final sentence, entrando in chiesa si prega di spegnere il cellulare, grazie, is not present at all in it as a translation. But it's present with an icon. You see a phone and you see a cross on it, And so there are mixtures of images, of verbal messages, and some part of them are not translated in this case. Mistakes, just a few examples. This is absolutely interesting. What can we say? Probably a Google Translator, but this has been printed. So can you imagine? Literacy in English is very, very poor in this case, but also in the other case here on the right side, this has been taken in a very nice and expensive restaurant, and the English translation, dear guest, the management of restaurant giving is Owen welcome. I can't even understand why. It's like having giving its own welcome. I don't even know what they wanted to say, and again, it's a printed information, and this doesn't give a very good impression of the restaurant itself. So it's something that should be considered by facility owners when they need to do this. And finally, a pragmatic example which is also interesting. This is in Merano, so we are again in a region where there is a great attention to languages and how they are presented to the public. Unfortunately, I can say, personally, I have the experience of this region, and I know that German speakers most of the times have a rather poor knowledge of Italian. And here is an example. Parkanlagen sauber halten means keep the park clean, okay? In Italian, not only this is changed into a prohibition instead of an invitation of keeping clean, and it's don't dirty the park, but the choice of lordare is very bad. I feel uncomfortable when I read as an Italian that I'm a person that is able to use this action, which I probably don't even use for dogs. So it's unusual, it's a very rare word, it's a very connotated negatively, and but you can see this around in Alto Adige. So, going back to conclusion, because I want to leave you time to intervene if you want, and my conclusions are these. First of all, the visibility of languages and scripts in the Italian environment are the product of various factors: national language policies, concentration of speakers of other languages, favorable attitude towards the visibility of other languages, and knowledge of other languages by local speakers. We have had examples of all these items. In this survey, three main categories of addressees of multilingual signs have been identified: tourists, including international students, immigrants, and locals. In certain cases, the language chosen, the kind of message, and the location define the target group with a certain degree of precision. The message in Romanian printed on an informative panel of a long-distance bus is clearly addressed to immigrants traveling from Italy to Romania and back. Also considering that the Romanian immigrant community is the largest in Italy. In other cases, locals, immigrants, and tourists are all potential addressees, as demonstrated by the messages in Italian, Romanian, Spanish, English, Chinese, Albanian, Russian, French, and Arabic in the emergency rooms of local hospitals. Luxury hotels and restaurants use traditionally Italian and English, plus German and French, as the guests either are native speakers of these languages or can use them as second languages. English is certainly the preferred choice due to its growing role of lingua franca in the world. Impressive is also the trend to use only English in certain private commercial facilities, or the position of Italian at the end of a list of translations in other languages, as if Italian addressees were not as relevant as the foreign clients. The position of a language either on top or at the left of the material support identifies both the sender and the addressees of the message. This is clear in bilingual signs in Alto Adige, where Italian is first when the sender is a national entity, and where German is first when the sender is a private or local German-speaking authority. Language and cultural clashes are also witnessed by this apparently innocent or casual positioning. Which is the Italian identity that appears through multilingual signage? Imagine of being one of the 60 million citizens living in Italy, or one of the 50 million tourists and international students moving yearly through Italy, or one of the 5 million resident immigrants. Most signage that you will encounter offering you information or addressing you with prohibitions or orders will be in more than one language, sometimes even in your mother tongue, but more often in a language that you may have studied as a second language, often accompanied by images that make the message clearer. Communication is essential, and you will probably have no difficulty in decoding them. If you are a tourist, sometimes you will note that the translations into your mother tongue or other languages are not perfect. And this will not have a good impact on your perception of the facility where you are or of the community in general. What kind of education is offered in this country, you may ask yourself. If you are an Italian citizen, you may be offended by the same observation, but you may be even more irritated when you see that your language, the national language, is not present in the sign or relegated in the last position of a list. If your mother tongue is an Italian dialect or one of the minority languages of ancient settlement, you may note that these are not present as a rule in multilingual signs. Your bilingualism, which includes your competence of Italian and other languages, will guarantee that you will understand the message in any case. I can add that dialects are often present, but in shop names, and as a rule without translations. So if we had included shop names in this collection, probably the result would have been different, but certainly they're not present in multilingual signs. If you are an immigrant of first generation and your Italian is not yet fluent, signs will take into consideration your difficulty and will include your language among the others. Chinese, Romanian, Albanian, therefore appear in certain contexts where your presence is most probable. Whoever you are as an addressee, multilingual signature will give you the idea that Italy is open to multiculturality. 20 languages have been detected in our corpus, even without choosing to explore specific areas of high concentration of resident speaking languages other than Italian. Just to give an idea, this research I mentioned in Tokyo in the 90s to show that Japan was opening to multiculturality instead of keeping remaining monolingual and monocultural as in the past, had collected around 3,000 signs, and they had only 14 languages. We have collected 200 signs, and we have 20 languages. So imagine this is a clear sign of a higher degree of multilingualism. But foreign languages and public signage are often used also to create or manipulate perceptions, not only to overcome comprehension issues. The high number of English translations has recently not only the aim of making messages understandable for the highest number of addressees, but also of giving the idea of a modern, fashionable, and up-to-date context, especially when the location is a commercial enterprise. The English language may therefore act as a means of inclusion, in counter-trend against the growing multiculturality of Italian contemporary society due to its prestige, diffusion, widespread knowledge among tourists, local Italians, and immigrants. The increasing competence in English among the younger generation will probably contribute to this trend, which may result in a generalized bilingual signage Italian-English, as it has been observed in Japan and more recently in China, or maybe reinforced by the augmented reality technology with instant translation devices, wireless audio chips, virtual reality pop-ups, and so on, that may change a multicultural environment into a monolingual one according to the individual user. But at the moment, this is not yet the case, as both opposed tendencies seem mirrored in a multilingual signage in Italy. On one side, as a proof of the intrinsic cultural variety of the Italian culture, on the other side, as an effect of the intercomprehension needs of a society where mobility and personal context are crucial for a peaceful coexistence. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for working. Yes, thank you, Pierangela. It's fascinating, something that we're surrounded by all the time, but we don't necessarily think about until our colleagues and our students go out and start collecting them. Pierangela's done a great job of keeping within the time limit, so we have plenty of time to hear.
Come here. Yeah, you can speak.
Well, anyway, I got a loud voice. I can do without. I can project my voice. This one? Let's try this one, yes. Okay, thank you. So thank you for the very interesting presentation. I noticed, and you pointed out yourself, that some areas have not been covered, like Sardinia, for example. I was wondering what the situation is like in those areas in Italy where there are minority languages, such as Molise with Croatian, or those, long-established communities like Albanian speaking in Puglia, or Greek in Calabria, or what is the situation like there? Thank you.
Yes, I just, in one of the pictures at the beginning, I have just mentioned these minority languages. Consider that there are little communities in certain cases, apart from French in Valle d'Aosta and German dialect in Alto Adige. I have not found any examples in the corpus, but I remember having seen, for example, the names of towns in the area where Arberesh, ancient Albanian, is present. But we have not considered the names of towns because they are not the kind of messages I wanted to consider. Or even the names of shops, again, may have this expressive use of dialects and in minority languages. In certain cases, a minority language is promoted and taught at school and has to be present in the landscape, like the case of Alto Adige. In other cases, they are not protected. And in Sardinia, there are also other examples. So if the research continues, we'll try to find if there are counter-examples. Like, I remember in Naples, for example, where dialect is still very alive and used by young people. And only in the university, I found a notice of welcome where at the last, as last in a list, the welcome was given in Neapolitan. But just as a joke, it's like funzione ludica, as just showing that you use your dialect now with as an expressive resource, and not like in the past as the unique resource, which was the case of many emigrants from Italy to Australia or Northern America. For them, the dialect was the only way of expressing. And now dialects has both in cinema and also among young people is used with an expressive function.
Pierangela, thank you for such rich presentation. I just wanted to ask you, and I know again that this is, that you have excluded certain kinds of signage and so on, but have you found any instance so far where Italian seems not to be the source language in terms of translation, or where at least it is not really possible to determine which one was the source language?
No. I think no cases of where Italian was not the source language. Even when there were examples without Italian, you could even interpret the mistakes, if they were there, as due to an Italian speaker who did not know very well the language. And it's very very sad to see that even the younger generation, who are often employed in these restaurants or hotels, do not notice these mistakes. Something interesting I'd be trying to find out. In this first pilot corpus, there were no examples of correction, hand correction. But I'm sure there are. And this could be important because my feeling also is to correct when I see a mistake. Probably because I'm a teacher, but I know that this could be a proof of a perception of a poor translation. Unfortunately, no, they were not in the example. So probably the reader either was not affected by or didn't notice the mistake or didn't feel. Sometimes in menus, I have seen that in menus, where there are so many mistakes when the name of a pizza is translated using a longer description in English, because how do you know what's in a Neapolitan pizza if you have not the ingredients on it? So this is another field of research I could...
Questions. I was wondering if also in those areas like Trentino, Alto Adige and Val d'Aosta, it happened to me that sometimes German, for example, was clearly the source language, whereas Italian was the target language, especially in institutional settings.
Sorry, I forgot Alto Adige. In this case, it's true, absolutely. In this case, Italian, like in the last case I presented, it was a German speaker who had produced the notice, and his or her imperfect knowledge of Italian was the cause of this pragmatic mistake. So in that region, of course, but there are these two groups. Either you are of one group or of another, and the signs produced by Poste Italiane are certainly done by Italian speakers, and those, like the one we have seen of that park, was probably done by an employee of the local community. Right.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I've got a couple of questions, because it has been noted that multilingualism in signage increases with prohibitions and orders in particular. So bearing in mind the three functions that you asked your students to identify, whether you have already identified a correlation between, for example, the use of immigrant languages in signage of prohibition. And the second question is whether you also are envisaging, maybe in later stages of your project, to have an ethnographic approach, which is advocated at the moment in linguistic landscape studies. Because, for example, to actually see how the addressee interprets the use of their languages, and I think that, for example, in the case of the Romanian signage that you showed, that addition, would be very interesting to know how Romanian people actually interpret that addition. So whether you're also considering
yes, in fact, in my university, there is another research group. Professor Vedovelli is the head of this research, which is exactly in this field research area. That means they study how immigrant languages are present in the landscape in areas, and so this is their target project. Also to see, although it's not if you, for example, if you have one language which is mostly present in the signs, it's not the witness of the high presence of this language in the territory. It's not related. Otherwise, in Italy, everybody should speak English because English is present in the sign. So as to immigrant language, they try to have an ethnographic insight on about, for example, how orders or but mostly how many occurrences of languages in certain areas and why, trying to interpret why. In my case, I didn't want to make this distinction, so I can't say that immigrant languages have more prohibitions than the other languages I have in the corpus. So my impression is that no, there is not this distinction. In the case of Romania, that was interesting because it can give you an idea of a habit, of a behavior that Romanians have, like the one of going and asking and claiming. But this can be also found in other cases. I have another example I didn't show you. In a supermarket, they told customers to use a basket, okay? And only in Italian, there was the prohibition of putting things in the basket without paying or something like that. So this was, to me, it was as if the owners of the shop said, Italians are thieves, because the other languages did not have this prohibition. So it's not specifically related to one language, in my opinion. And of course, there is also the subjectivity of the sender. If it's a local authority, you can probably see a higher degree of rules to be followed, but as you see, not always. But a shopkeeper, the owner of a restaurant, they can decide to write something or something else without even thinking too much about it. So it's research in progress, and I'll take into account also your observations, which are very relevant to me.
Other questions?
It's probably a silly question, but please feel free not to answer.
Okay.
Do you think there will be an impact with Brexit on the use of English? Or will the Italians be practical and accept that English is a lingua franca and just we have to get on with it, and tourists from all over the world will understand
Personal
English
opinion,
signs?
no impact, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
English also. Not only as a lingua franca is English present in the urban landscapes. That means not only with a practical value, but also as part of the soundscape. There is another word that probably will come out in the researches, the future researches, because this semiotic landscape does not only consider the language, but also the other kinds of messages that surround you when you arrive into a place. For me, for example, arriving in Prato for the first time, I noticed many black people around. I was expecting Chinese, or on the contrary, from the station to the hotel, I met plenty of black people. This was part of the landscape of this town, which was foreign to me. I heard their voices. I saw no signs in Chinese, which I was also expecting. So this is the whole of it. And English is part of the soundscape of the young generations. They listen to English songs without understanding. They hear them in shops. So I don't think that Brexit will have any impact on it.
We have time for one last question. Any takers? Yeah.
anyone who wants to join this research is invited to contact me, or maybe if they have students who want to take part. At the moment, it's only related to Italy, but after these 2 years of collection, I would like to expand it elsewhere.
This isn't a question, actually. Just a couple of interesting tidbits maybe to add to your corpus. Just outside the center here, there's a florist that is called Heaven Flowers Floristi. And I thought that was really funny because in English, you know, it would be heavenly flowers or heaven's flowers or something like that. So it's an example of, you know, using English in the shop's name and sort of not quite hitting the mark. And also at the hotel where I'm staying, it offers us to choose our centrifugate for the juice. It's, you know, like a sort of mistranslation of, yeah. So not a question, but just, you know, a couple of...
No, it's true. Even when you don't notice an evident mistake, you may wonder, is it an expression that I would find in an English-speaking country? I'm angry against many of these shopkeepers who do these mistakes, because you just need to go into internet and you will find plenty of examples, even of signs in other countries. In Siena, I remember there was our campsite was temporarily closed, and there was the announcement in various languages printed again, because it was a long period. It was going to be closed, and it was campeggio chiuso. And in English it was closed campsite. Now, if you say closed campsite, it's like as if the campsite was always closed. It was the characteristic of this campsite because the writer had learned at school that in English adjectives are always before the noun. I can understand this. And if you look in the internet, you will find plenty of signs where you have cache closed, campsite closed, but you just need to find your information. When I learned languages in the 70s at the School for Interpreters of Florence, I had nothing like that. My informants were the few foreign people I found. Italy was a much more monolingual country. In Siena, I had the opportunity to learn French when I was 3 because one French lady had moved to Siena, and I learned German because one German nun had moved to Siena. One. So now it's completely different, and you cannot understand these kinds of mistakes.
So you're accepting submissions if people email you their photographs of signs?
Sorry?
Are you accepting submissions if people email you their photographs of signs?
Please. I would like to...
You might be inundated.
If you email signs you see, now that you know the kind of research
maybe with the location.
Would be welcome. Thank you very much.
Pierangela is also, we need to wind this up, but you're also organising a conference.
Yes.
Remind us what your conference is
The
in Siena.
International Association of Teachers of Italian, AIP, is now organising the next conference in Siena in the beginning of September 2018. And the theme is Le vie dell'italiano, so how Italian has moved through language, music, art, science, and whatever. Because Siena was in the Via Francigena from France to Rome, so the moving is part of our DNA. And if you are interested in taking part, you will see the call in a few weeks in the website of the Università per Stranieri, and I hope to see you in Siena next September.
And we'll circulate it through ACIS mailing lists as well.
Thank you.
So please join me in thanking Pierangela for a really stimulating talk.